Baruch
Atah
atah Adonai
Adonai
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam
haolam
asher
asher
tzivanu
tzivanu
b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu
לעשות
v'asot.
דברי.
Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, as our sheet is coming up, tonight we're going to be discussing Vashti. On one foot, Vashti was the first wife of King Achashverosh / Ahasuerus in Megillat Esther, otherwise known as the Megillah, which we read on Purim. So, we're going to start with a picture. I'm going to tell you that the name of the picture is Vashti Refuses the King's Summons. So the three questions we're going to discuss are, what do you see in the picture? What do you think is going on in the picture? And what do you wonder? In this case, since the title of the picture tells us that it is about Vashti, it is fair to say that you see Queen Vashti. I think that is a reasonable assumption. So what else do we see in the picture?
Well, I think the three people on
Naomi, go ahead.
okay, I think the three people on the right look like they're pleading, and she looks like she's turning a deaf ear. She's turning away from them.
All right, so you see women with their arms outstretched and Vashti turned away from them.
Yeah.
All right, what else do people see?
I see the people in the left-hand corner have their hands up, and I think they're saying, "Oh, we got problems," because Vashti's not coming to do what the king wants.
It's also really, really lush. I mean, maybe that sounds dumb because she's the queen, but that table she's sitting on, I originally thought it was like wood, like, a craggly, cool wood thing, but that's like an animal head.
Those are animal
You know what I mean?
hides.
Like that it's a fur and they're dressed beautifully. You know what I mean? It's really quite, I don't know. There's sort of a beauty to all of the attire as well, which I suppose, again, she's a queen, but it's pretty. I mean, it's too bad. We all know what's going to happen.
But somebody in the background, one of the men has their hands up as if they're trying to stop somebody or something.
Yeah. All right, so you see that their hands are up and you think that they are trying to stop somebody.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on, wait a second, just pause, think about something. At least that's one of my gestures.
The different Vashti looks troubled or perplexed, maybe.
The differences in skin tone are very interesting. Vashti is so much more pale, like alabaster, and she almost has this ethereal look. And I'm assuming the three to the right are women from the harem. The one because of her cleavage, the one because of her earrings, the one maybe the dress, but the one with the earrings has lighter tone, but it's not nearly as light as Vashti.
It's almost her. I was going to also say her skin tone, but her skin tone and the dress, it's all kind of I describe it as alabaster, which is almost stone-like, marble-like, statue-like.
Also, just the fact that it's a lighter tone, it helps her stand out from the background. You're focused, I'm focused directly on her because of that.
David, I can't see the bottom of my screen. Are we seeing her toes?
Yeah, her foot.
Does she have, I can't tell, does she have a sandal on or just she's barefoot?
That's a sandal.
Oh, well, okay. And now we can see the animal head even more clearly.
Oh, yeah, with the teeth still in it.
Yeah, there's also a crown to the right behind Vashti that's sitting on a pillow or something like that.
Well, how much of the painting is influenced by the story of Vashti, and how much of the painting is influenced by the era it was painted and the style of the artist? And how does that affect how you look at the painting?
Mhm.
So I'll tell you that this was painted by an English painter, Edwin Long, in 1879, and he was inspired to teach, quote, Oriental stories after visiting Egypt and Syria in 1874. So he's definitely going for a particular style. But he's using it, but he's like, the style is the vehicle, and then the passenger in the vehicle, so to speak, is the story, this particular story. What do you wonder or think? So we kind of did think and see together, but what do you wonder about the picture?
I think that the way that Vashti is holding her arms is, kind of showing a certain modesty and kind of protectiveness of what's going on in her mind. I don't know.
I wonder if there's any significance to the animal skin, because boy, the eye on the, whether it's a lion or whatever animal is, sort of looks like it's looking out at you in a warning sort of fashion. Stay away.
Looks like a bear.
Yeah, a bear. But would they have had that kind of a bear in the Mideast?
There are bears mentioned in the Bible.
There are, okay.
A great question, though.
So painters don't necessarily have to worry about not just anachronisms, but whatever the word is for geographic inappropriate. If you look at all the ways in which Jesus was depicted in paintings,
Yeah. There's a comment in the chat. I can see despair and sadness in her eyes, almost like she's hurt about something.
I am looking for sadness in her eyes, yet all I see is indifference on her face. There's no affect, there's no expression, and she's protecting herself like, you're not going to see me. But I don't see anything that gives me a clue as to what she's really thinking.
She doesn't look defiant.
No.
I don't think.
She kind of looks a little bit annoyed, honestly, because her eyes are also kind of like, her face is also, it's like forward, but like her eyes are kind of like off to the side, like, please go away. That's like the kind of feeling I have, especially with the courtier servants on the right. Kind of looks like her face is kind of saying, please leave me alone.
Another comment in the chat, the way she holds her hands crossed can mean a sense of protection.
Mhm. Protection or modesty.
All right. Let's look at the actual text. Octavio, would you be willing to read the first section, please? Act 1, so to speak.
Yes, sir. It happened in the days of Ahasuerus that Ahasuerus, who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Nubia or Ethiopia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus occupied the royal throne in the fortress Shushan, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers, the administration of Persia and Media, the nobles and the governors of the provinces in his service. For no fewer than 180 days, he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom and the splendid glory of his majesty. At the end of this period, the king gave a banquet for 7 days in the court of the king's palace garden for all the people who lived in the fortress Shushan, high and low alike. There were hangings of white cotton and blue wool, cut up by cords of fine linen and purple wool to silver rods and alabaster columns. And there were couches of gold and silver on a pavement of marble, alabaster, mother of pearl and mosaics. Royal wine was served in abundance as befits a king in golden beakers of varied design. And the rule for the drinking was no restrictions, for the king has given orders to every palace steward to comply with each man's wishes. In addition, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for women in the royal palace of King Ahasuerus. Context. This is the very beginning of the biblical book of Esther. 1. History and stories is not inevitable. People and authors make... You can go up a little bit, David. Make choices. At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Okay, thank you.
Well, this particular ruler could have just not been around at the point we see here. Something could have happened. He could have died at some other point. Maybe he could have been overthrown by one of those groups of vassals, of like different provinces that are underneath him. So the political setup that even has this ruler here in the first place could be different, and that would, at least I would think, have some kind of effect later on the line as well.
By having this big celebration, he was actually bragging about what he's done. And maybe if he had been more modest, he would have had a smaller celebration or none at all.
Could have not invited his queen to dance for them.
Not there yet.
That's true. That is a good answer, and for Act 2. We'll get there.
Could not have drunken so much that he was drunk when he here.
Right. Even the length, I mean, 180 days, right? Isn't that 6 months?
That's
You know, even if just anything was, that would have been significant, perhaps.
Yeah, and the orders, the king gave orders to the palace steward to comply with each man's wishes. That could have turned into chaos.
Yeah.
All right, question 2. If you had to guess, how would you describe the king's party? The mood and or what was going on there?
Drunken orgy.
Well, I wouldn't say an orgy because the men and the women were separate.
So,
So,
Do you know that though?
well, it says here, Queen
But they-
Vashti
She had a
gave a banquet
banquet.
for women.
yeah, no, but he said whatever the men want, give him.
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking, that he
Yeah.
also said, and all the men's wishes, each man's wishes. I mean, you
Yeah.
kind of wonder what other women were
Right, they would wish for a woman.
experiencing. Yeah,
I think that's something that we
Possible.
will have to find out about.
Okay,
I mean, right now we're speculating. That's one thing that could have been. But it could
Mm-hmm.
just be the wish to drink and eat.
Well, maybe if we go back to the picture,
Because it's,
go ahead, Charles, finish.
I was just saying because it says, and the rule for drinking was no restrictions. It's referring
Right.
directly to drinking.
hmm
Maybe if we go back to the picture up in the left-hand corner, the person talking to the woman whose arms were up in the air was some steward trying to get the women to come into the room where the men were at their behest, and she was exasperated and was also trying to,
Could
push
be.
the idea away.
I mean, if you're looking at the title of the the work of art, she's sitting there refusing to go or respond to the summons of the king.
hmm
And I think one of the ladies there with her arms up, extending her arm towards the where the men are in the other room, or the she's saying, "Why don't you go in? Go, please go. You don't want to get him. He'll be displeased."
Okay.
Two things that I noticed in the story is, number one is the full description of King Xerxes or Viserys kingdom, right? The cotton, the blue wool, the gold, the marble, etc. And if we notice at the end, when they talk about Queen Vashti, it just says gave a banquet for women in the royal palace. So there's no description of her side of the place. So two differences there. And the other thing that I see, the second thing is that the description of this king and everything that he owns and he has almost makes me see him as a greedy a king who wants to show off his wealth. He wants to show off what he has and owns, and just telling people, do whatever you want, no restrictions. I'm the king, I say what goes, and just shows that power that he just has, right? And I feel that is the gist of the story here in this, at least in this part.
Yeah.
They were eating and drinking for 180 days with no restrictions. I would think that most of the time, a lot of them were asleep. And I would think some of the time, a lot of them weren't holding all their food and drink down very well. It should be a mess.
All right, next question. If you had to guess, how would you describe the Queen's party, the mood, and or what was going on there?
very little information given.
Yeah, all we're given is one sentence.
Yeah, right. So it
Right.
sounds like a calm event.
Right. This is why I started the question with if you had to guess, because I
Yeah,
recognize that there is
nothing, yeah.
nothing to go off of from the text.
They were probably more dignified.
It was
Much
the
more
music
refined.
and dancing and entertainment, food, gossip.
You'd still have to ask though if she inspired the same kind of I mean, jealousy. Like she's certainly irritated or it's not going well in that picture. But if they invited everybody and all the town and all the people, like it's a royal something, I bet some of the women are sort of excited to be there and be around the queen and indulge. Possible.
And they were probably wondering what the men were doing.
I wonder how many of the women felt that or did not have any decent feelings for Vashti. She was after all another piece of what the king owned, another property they owned. And they may have felt that, so she's having a party. It's not going to be as excessively nauseating as the king's, but it's a more sedate party. Because she doesn't have the glory and the honor and the reputation until later that the king has, or that he created for himself.
All right, last question for this act. Why might Vashti be giving a separate party at all?
Say it again.
Why might Vashti have been giving a separate party at all?
I said maybe the king ordered her to.
Well, you know, it's funny, they're not Jewish. So at first, if it's like Orthodox, that's why. But, you know, it's a fair question. I don't know. Right.
It could just be since this is supposed to be taking place in Persia, this could be some kind of reference to a Zoroastrian modesty practice. I don't know enough about their society to say anything. Maybe that could be what's referenced here.
Yeah. But you can see even today, there's remnants of this very of society. You can see that in Afghanistan and other places. It hasn't been that long where women were totally covered and hidden from everybody except their own husbands in their own homes. And so there's this question of keeping your wife separate from other men. That may be why the queen was entertaining the men's wives, so to avoid this problem that women were just separate, and they discussed things that were, shall I say, that they preferred discussing amongst women because they had a certain modesty. Or I know with my wife and some of her friends, I say, well, my wife and I like to go out and have lunch together with another, visit with her and her friends. But sometimes one of her lady friends say, no, don't bring him along. I want to talk to you about some things. And those are just things for us to talk about. So I can see that at least in my experience with my wife and some of her friends, there's things she likes to discuss. And they may be intimate things, and they would prefer not to have other men or other people that know them be informed or be privy to those particular discussions.
Well, we know a little bit about this because we see that there are these eunuchs are mentioned right in verse 10.
We haven't gotten to them yet.
We haven't gotten to them. Oh, I'm sorry. I take them back.
Phil spoiled it for us.
Oh, I cheated. That's true. That's a spoiler. You're right.
No, but that's always been part of the system, how folks lived back then in any case, and that's why they kept the women isolated in separate, and that may be why the queen was having a separate party, because women were segregated in those times, and to avoid, as we said before, the contact with men.
It also could be that you're seeing a little bit of rebellion, and she may be doing it just to be rebellious. You
Could
can have a
be.
pretty silken eye.
Hmm?
Well, if her husband was gone for 180 days, maybe she just got lonely and invited some of the girls over,
Yeah. That's good.
hang out.
All right, let's go into Act 2. Jesse, would you read this, please?
On the seventh day, when the king was merry with wine, he ordered Nehuman, the Setha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abigatha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs in attendance on King Achashverosh, to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing a royal crown, to display her beauty to the peoples and the officials, for she was a beautiful woman. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuch. The king was greatly incensed, and his fury burned within him. Context. This is the next part of the story. Note that the text says that Vashti was asked to come wearing her crown, not wearing only her crown. Question 1. At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Thank you.
For some reason in modern today, when we talk about this, we keep saying that she was to come only in her crown. I don't know where that came up, but that rose from, but that is not in the story.
Talmudic. It's a Talmudic midrash.
And that's why and that's the reason we think that she didn't come.
It's possible that's a bit of a technicality, though. Like, it's a few notches better to not have come naked, but it's still wholly objectifying and uncomfortable, and you don't quite know where it goes from there, though I appreciate it does not say only a crown.
Yeah, that could be it. Why Vashti also, didn't want to go is she didn't want to be on display, regardless if she was in the nude or not. She didn't want to be as a display. She I don't know who said something about rebelling, but I think that's exactly what happened, is that she was rebelling. And in those times, as we were talking about in the past, a woman was not was expected to obey whatever their husbands demanded, right? So her choice to defy his request was very controversial and dangerous for her. So in the way that I see this for her is that she was actually very brave, because she was kind of keeping her dignity, if you may, right? If we really think that the king was going to display her either in the nude or whatever, she said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Probably didn't want a bunch of drunken men grabbing at her.
All right.
So I guess if it's asking how could it have come out differently, I mean, maybe if even the king had oriented her that this was going to happen, like had a little discussion, that sometime during his 6-month festivity, he may ask her to join in some way. Might have helped.
Or she could have just acceded to his wish,
Yeah, right.
picked up the crown off the table in the back and walked in and said hello to everybody. Because that's certainly embarrassing the king as well. But the point is it just for display, just displaying another possession he has, like the other things that he's put on display?
I wonder if she would have behaved the same way if King Achashverosh himself had come and asked her to, instead of sending his eunuchs, he himself had come to her and said, Vashti, would you kindly come and dance for us? Because she would have had different ends.
All right. What might the king have been hoping to get by having Vashti come?
Well, it made him look better that he has this beautiful woman as his queen. And people would revere him more.
Right. He wanted to show off.
Right, right. Now, did you see what Barry sent, that message that said that the banquet was only 7 days, not 6 months? The festivities lasted 6 months.
Yeah, let's look back at the text.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's totally.
Verse 3, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers for no, so you can read, and then it says for no fewer than 180 days he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom.
Yeah.
And then verse 5, he
Yeah,
gives a banquet for everybody who lives in the Shushan, high and low alike. So
at the end of the period,
right. So you can read 3 and 4 as being two different things. Like he gave a banquet, and then for 180 days he displayed the riches of his kingdom.
Yeah.
Or you can read it as he gave a banquet and it was for 180 days.
Or maybe he gave 2 banquets. He gave
Right.
a banquet, then they showed off his festivities at the end of that period, then he gave a banquet for 7 days.
Right. Was that?
Yeah.
Yes. So
So it's hard to know how much ruling he's doing while he's showing off all his riches for the 6 months. But
Right.
maybe they're one and the riches, and you can still tell people what to do.
yes. Also, if everybody is there, I'm just realizing this now, like it's something that we learned as camp counselors. If all the counselors are here, who's watching the kids? So like if all of the governors are out of the way for 6 months, like who's running their provinces? But presumably they had a second in command and such, lieutenant governors.
Well,
There is a difference between the first.
Your power.
All right, Phil and then Morris.
I'm sorry. As for I can't completely resolve it, but as for the 180 days, there's we first hear, there do seem to be 2 banquets. In verse 3, the banquets are for officials and courtiers, okay? And the big shots. Now, why they had 180 days, or at least something was going on for 180 days, and he had a banquet, and then he had a special 7-day banquet.
All the people.
Verse 5 for the people who lived in the fortress, high and low alike. So the low must include people other than his courtiers, I would think. And so, that was, and that was the banquet that was maybe the most unruly, where he, where his wife was asked to come and demean herself or whatever.
We don't know when she was invited, at the beginning with the first banquet or at the end for the 7-day banquet.
It says this on the 7th day of the 7th day banquet. I don't want to be argumentative, but it says on the 7th day when the king was married with wine, that's when he ordered the eunuchs to bring her there. That's all I got.
Well, the thing that I'd like to bring up is, I just want to know if this is true, and that is that if Queen Vashti, her father was a previous king, and Achashverosh served in the king's, in his, whatever you want to call it, I don't know.
His court.
Yes, in his court. And so he became king by marrying Vashti. So I'm just wondering if that plays into the fact that, here he was kind of showing off to everybody that he was the king, and that maybe to Vashti it was a little bit too much.
That was one of the midrashes.
Yeah, that's midrash. Like the only thing that we have in the text about Vashti is what you have in front of you. So everything else, and also actually, no, I was going to say also for Achashverosh, but there was another reference to him somewhere else, I believe. But as far as Vashti, this is all we've got. So everything else is the rabbis making up pro-Vashti and anti-Vashti explanations to either make her look better or make her look worse.
Mhm.
And I've got links for those in the appendices. All right, why might Vashti have refused?
What?
She was modest.
Well, one reason is to push the story along. If she doesn't refuse, the story ends.
Oh, sorry.
Said by a great storyteller.
Well,
Story would also have ended if she refused and the king accepted it.
yeah.
Let's go into the matrix. So we've got a comment, Vashti did not want to be treated like a possession. She was his named queen.
And you know, she may also have had, I mean, someone had said rebellious, but she could have also been haughty and not in the mood and sort of pissed and entitled. I mean, we don't know. Like your comment is funny depending on who wants her to look how. She can either come off looking noble and just, or maybe she was really kind of an entitled, you know, princess, kidding, queen, but like who was like, I'm not in the mood. You know, we don't actually know the quality of their marriage or anything between them. That's so, yeah, she could have just been like not having it, just cause.
Maybe she was a modest woman and didn't want to be displayed.
Or maybe it wasn't modesty. Maybe she finally said, I've had enough of this.
She had guts.
Maybe she was having too good a time at her party and didn't want to leave it.
Could be.
Exactly.
Well, isn't there also an assumption that that she was only one of his wives, and why her?
Ever hear about the others?
She was his only wife. He had other women that he could spend the night with.
Concubines?
Yeah, that'd be the word.
Yes. Members of the royal harem. But she was his only wife. All right. How might Vashti have felt before, during, and after she refused?
Could have felt insulted by being asked, and afterwards being a bit relieved, or maybe being afraid of what might befall her.
Well, I think she wouldn't have known though. Not known that he would necessarily kill her, but women knew their place, didn't they? They didn't have any power. I mean, even the queens, if they weren't, I mean, she wasn't really thinking like that, but maybe it's a fair question. Maybe someone said she was done. Maybe she was done, but it wasn't that she was like, I've had it. Come what may. I mean, including death.
And there may have been a woman's movement at that point too, something where the women had decided that they were not going to be used or abused, and they stood up for themselves, and she was taking a lead in that, trying to show that women were not to be treated that way as possessions. You know, just because we had women's lib recently didn't mean it didn't happen back then too.
Don't leave us hanging without
All
it.
right, Act 3.
Okay.
Let's finish this off. Naomi, would you be willing to read this, please?
Then the king consulted the sages, learned in procedure, for it was the royal practice to turn to all who were versed in law and precedent. His closest advisors were Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 ministers of Persia and Media, who had access to the royal presence and occupied the first place in the kingdom. What, he asked, shall be done according to law to King Vashti for failing to obey the command of King Achashverosh, conveyed by the eunuchs? Thereupon Memucan declared in the presence of the king and the ministers, Queen Vashti has committed an offense not only against your majesty, but against all the officials and against all the peoples in all the provinces of King Achashverosh. For the queen's behavior will make all wives despise their husbands, as they reflect that King Achashverosh himself ordered Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's behavior will cite it to all your majesty's officials, and there will be no end of scorn and provocation. If it please your majesty, let a royal edict be issued by you, and let it be written into the laws of Persia and Media, so that it cannot be abrogated, that Vashti shall never enter the presence of King Achashverosh, and let your majesty bestow her royal state upon another who is more worthy than she. Then will the judgment executed by your majesty resound throughout your realm, vast though it is, and all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike. The proposal was approved by the king and the ministers, and the king did as Memucan proposed. Dispatches were sent to all the provinces of the king, to every province in its own script, and to every nation in its own language, that every man shall wield authority in his home and speak the language of his own people. Context. This is the next and last part of chapter 1 of the Book of Esther. At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Thank you.
I have a question that isn't even related to this. Why are there 7 eunuchs and 7 days of the party and 7 of the king's court? Does the 7 mean anything?
7 days of the week.
7, yeah. I mean, or is it just?
What's it?
I don't
It's-
know.
I mean, it depends on your perspective on this. Some people look at that question and they're like, it's a literary device.
Yeah.
Other people look at the question and say it symbolizes something. It symbolizes completion or something like that. Other people look at the question and say, at least for the advisors, well, they needed an odd number in case there was a tie on what he ought to do.
Mhm.
You know, different
Interesting.
angles looking into the same room with the question in it.
Memucan and Edmatha were also two of the eunuchs.
Were they?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible.
So
So
I guess there's slightly different spelling of Mecuman. It's not Memucan. Okay, my
Yeah.
mistake.
Easily confused names. All right, I'm going to ask a different question because we're almost out of time. Actually, I'm going to pose 3 questions and you can answer whatever you want. What was Memucan afraid would happen if Vashti was not banished? Note that the text does not say that she was killed. How might Vashti have felt leaving the palace?
True.
And how might this story be relevant today?
I mean, the story is no different today,
Yeah.
right? That if one person, what is that? You give an inch, they take a mile, whoever they are. That it's the same oppressive language that we use about any, anything we're afraid is going to change and have us lose our power. That's what strikes me.
Suffragette movement. How long was that? Why were men afraid of letting women have the vote in this country? Same thing.
Vashti might have felt free leaving the palace because maybe she was oppressed the whole time she lived there.
But if Vashti was banished, the rest of the women in the realm could have banded together and say they're not going to please their husbands until Vashti's allowed to come back. They could have banded together, but they didn't.
Well, because they exiled her.
David, could you scroll up so we could see that paragraph?
It's a long paragraph. Let me know if there's a specific part of it you want.
Let's see.
May I say something else? I know it's interesting in that line that all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike. There sometimes is this confusion that respect isn't the same as fear. So that all these decrees they make you afraid. If you'd like to view that as respect, okay, but it's actually not the same. It's sort of interesting, again, that it's not respect that they're imbuing here. It's fear and dominance. And I'm sure they kept, they toed the line, but it's curious how it's confused with respect when it's not the same.
Well, we respect, we love, and we fear God all at the same time.
Yeah, there's not that quality to this line. I don't think. I don't think this imbues respect. I think it imbues
Fear.
Yeah, fear and pejorative and all of that. There's not anything mutual about that.
Okay, recognizing the time, I want to quickly show you what's in the rest of this source sheet, and then you can explore it on your own. So we have a musical version of Vashti's story. This is by Debbie Friedman, and here it's being performed as part of a Purim spiel. Then Appendix A is the full story all in one place, so you can see it all together. Appendix B is a comparison of Vashti and Esther from a feminist perspective. Appendix C is 2 different links to all the midrashim about her. Appendix D is a modern midrash where someone writes an article as if she was defending Vashti in the modern time. It plays on a lot of the midrashim, so you might want to acquaint yourself with them first, or not. And then Appendix E is another comparison of Esther versus Vashti and relevance today.
Wow.
And where do we keep this link?